Our good pal KC Joyner, ESPN.com senior NFL insider, joins me now as the Eagles get ready for the Giants. We've got Thanksgiving Day football. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Casey. How are you?
Good. I like to hear that. Adam Copeland, the guy who plays Edge, he works for this charity called Headlock on Hunger, and they feed hungry kids down in the North Carolina area. And I talked to him last year and thinks he's the nicest guy in the world. So really appreciate that intro, man.
Well, that's a Josh pick there. I'm out on location today. We're at Vagabond Kitchen and Tap House in Atlantic City for our 99 bottles party. But let's get into the Thursday games here first, Casey, before we talk about the Eagles and the Giants, since we have you on a special Wednesday. Trubisky might be out tomorrow. We got the Lions, really kind of playing out the string here. This is an important game for the Bears, so I'm kind of interested to see what you think about this Bears team. Are they at the level where Trubisky's not that important that it doesn't matter that he doesn't play? We know they're very predicated on defense, so I'm kind of intrigued to get your breakdown of this one.
I'd be curious to see how much Chicago leans on the ground game, because I do these analyses for ESPN's fantasy section about most favorable and unfavorable blocking matchups. And Chicago is the 9th most favorable blocking matchup, but it's much because Detroit ranks 23rd in my run defense metrics over the past 5 weeks. Chicago's only middle tier as far as their blocking goes, so that it's not something they can really rely on. And Jordan Howard's not being very productive when he does get a lot of carries. So Chicago, though, they do rate very well against Detroit on the other side of the ball, because Chicago's got a very good front seven. But I have a feeling they're going to have to win the game more on defense and running, because even though I like the passing matchups, I just don't trust not having Trubisky in the lineup.
Washington, Dallas, a big one in this area. Eagle fans actually have to cheer for Dallas. Doug Peterson admitted that today, that, hey, we put ourselves in a position where we have to root for the Cowboys. Washington's all banged up. Dallas seemingly is playing much better. They're getting rolling at the right time. So, break down the matchup. Washington on the road in Dallas against a Dallas team that's got things right.
Dallas does have things right. Washington, their line has been playing better, even though they have all the injuries. They still rank 5th in my overall blocking metrics. Problem for them is Dallas ranks 6th in front seven defense metrics. So Dallas is doing quite well there. And I have a feeling that my metrics great the last 5 weeks. I'm feeling if I move that forward, 3 weeks, something of that nature, since the injury started to hit them, their grade wouldn't be anywhere near as good. Dallas has some terrific players in their secondary who can play exceptionally well. Washington has some weaknesses in their secondary. I'm looking at this and going, I could see 8 ways out of 10 that Dallas wins this game, because Washington's just a limited team right now.
Does that mean moving forward that Washington is going to have these problems on the offensive line, no Alex Smith? Does that mean moving forward you think that Washington will start to slide back to the back of the NFC East?
I do think that Washington's slated to move back. I don't think that this is going to be because you can't suffer as many injuries as they suffered. Their receiving corps has been in terrible shape. Trey Quinn, you say, who's Trey Quinn? And it's exactly, he was one of their top receivers last week, and that's how deep they're having to go on their bench. Dibbs is not nearly as good as Thompson. Thompson's out again this week. Washington has a ton of tough run defense matchups coming up, so I'm not going to lean on Peterson as much. I just look at it, and it does not fare well for them. If they had a healthy Smith and they had a good passing game, they might be better down the stretch. But I just think they're going to have some problems, even though their schedule looks like it should be favorable.
Atlanta at New Orleans. We saw what the Saints did to the Eagles last week. Atlanta is a team that has struggled the last couple of weeks. We thought they were ready to take off offensively, and then all of a sudden, they've kind of fallen flat. New Orleans is just wrecking teams right now. So give me your thoughts on, where Atlanta and New Orleans look at, because the Saints are playing for number 1 seed, so they're not taking the foot off the gas at all here.
They're not, but it was a surprising thing. I mentioned that those offensive line blocking grade analyses, and the biggest surprise I came up with this week was Atlanta versus New Orleans defense. Atlanta ranks 4th in overall blocking metrics over the past 5 weeks. New Orleans defense, their front seven, they ranked 24th. They're not doing well against the run, and they're not doing well against the pass, and they were a dominant run defense earlier this year, but when you look at the advanced blocking metrics, they're not doing very well at all, and I think Atlanta's going to be able to run the ball and slow things down if they want to, and they've got a bigger blocking advantage than New Orleans does, so I think Atlanta's got a very good chance of pulling off the upset.
All right, KC Joyner here on the Sports Fast 97.3 ESPN. Let's get into this Eagles-Giants matchup here, kind of break it down from the angles like we always do, Casey. You look at the matchups here. Let's start with the Eagles' offense. Really struggling, can't score, aren't moving the ball. Let's start with their run game. Do we anticipate this a week where the Eagles should and can start to get the run game going?
I grade these blocking matchups on a relative basis, meaning that if two teams have, I rate them by grades. If you have two A-rated teams, that grade is going to be a C because it's a powerhouse versus powerhouse. Keeping that in mind, Philadelphia has the 15th most favorable run matchup this week on offense, because even though their run blocking for the past 5 weeks ranks 27th, the Giants' run defense ranks 24th, and you add it up, it's about a push. So I think they're going to be able to have some success in that area. They are going to be able to run the ball with some success. And the Giants rank 31st in my pass rushing metrics of the past 5 weeks. And Philadelphia ranks 22nd in pass blocking, but that's still a pretty big edge. So when I look at that advantage there, Philadelphia's got a much bigger blocking edge on their offensive side of the ball than the Giants do on their side of the ball.
When Carson Wentz has to throw, I don't know about you, but Alshon Jeffrey, Golden Tate, Zach Ertz, they've got weapons. So why are they unable to move the ball successfully?
Looking at the Eagles' vertical pass metrics this year, how productive they are when they throw the ball 11 or more yards downfield. Zach Ertz leads the team in receiving yards at that level, 421. Next up is Aguilar, which is a shock, as you'd think, even with with Jeffrey being out for a few games, that he would rank second. But what's surprising to me is that they throw. If you're looking at you can measure how many times a player gets targeted based on how many routes they run. We call it receptions per route run. Alshon Jeffrey's only been targeted on 20. He's only got a reception on 12.5% of his vertical targets downfield. That's a very low number, and it says that because he's only got a 45.8% catch rate. What it boils down to is he's running a lot of vertical routes, and they're throwing it to him, but he's not making the catches, and it's not because he's dropping them, because he has 0 drops of vertical passes. So I think it's just a matter of giving Wentz some good blocking, running Jeffrey on those vertical routes, and being more accurate on the throws, because Jeffrey is he's capable of getting open and beating this secondary, but you got to get the ball to him in order to do that.
Eagles offensive line, middle of the pack, I guess. People around here say they stink, but when you look around the league, they're probably not too bad. But what are they facing when they see this Giants pass rush?
Giants pass rush is atrocious. Again, 31st in my pass rushing metrics over the past 5 weeks. They're not getting good pass pressure, they're not getting good sacks, they're letting people, the quarterback, have a lot of time in the pocket. I mean, this is the sort of matchup to where Philadelphia, they don't even have to call for max protect. Just don't put your offensive line in a lot of unfavorable situations. Don't put a lot of pressure on them. Give them some help with the tight end, something of that nature. Keep Goddard in the block instead of going downfield. Do things like that and say, Wentz, we're going to give you a little more protection than usual, and we're facing this defensive line that cannot pass rush. You do that, he ought to be able to have a clean pocket a lot of the time. And again, the New York secondary is shaky. I think that if you can give Wentz a lot of time to throw, he might throw for 300. So that's the key, is blocking for Wentz.
What about Ertz? We have to ask about him each and every week. Is this an Ertz week?
Ertz has Landon Collins in coverage, probably, and Landon Collins has been solid this year. Nothing great, nothing terrible. And in fact, I've got him, as you've heard my color grade rankings before: red, yellow, green. Red being tough, yellow being okay, green being favorable. He ranks in the yellow grades, and what that means is that if a player is capable of catching or seeing 10 targets and catching 7 passes, a yellow-rated defensive player is probably going to let them do that very number. So I think Ertz is still going to be a centerpiece of the offense. He is the most vertically, he's got more vertical receptions and targets and routes than anybody else on this team. I think it's going to stay the case here, and it's going to take some pressure off, though, because the Giants are trying to stop Ertz. They're not going to think of giving the cornerbacks as much help, and that's the problem for them because the cornerbacks aren't that good.
All right, let's look at the Giant offense here. Saquon Barkley. The Eagles have a good run defense statistically. That hasn't been the case against Zeke Elliott, Kamara. They've had some problems the last couple of weeks. What kind of challenge do they have this week against the Giants?
It is surprising because Philadelphia, for the early parts of the year, they were in the top 5 in my run defense metrics, and over the past 5 weeks, they rank 18th in my run defense metrics. And the problem for the Giants is Barkley's great, but their blocking is not that good. They rank 23rd in my run blocking metrics for the past 5 weeks. You add the two together, and it looks like a C grade for this matchup. This is definite dead middle of the league. as far as run blocking goes. So Barkley will do well because he's just that good of a back. But the Eagles, as far as it goes, the metrics say that it should be a push there. And I think the Eagles' defense is still capable of doing better than what these metrics are. So if the Eagles play to their talent level, they can turn this into a favorable manage for them.
Casey, Eli, we know he struggles with pressure and accuracy and the deep ball, but, every once in a while he pulls one out. This secondary, Crevon LeBlanc, Shandon Sullivan, Trey Sullivan, Devontae Bosby. Does that even make Eli Manning look like a 2007 version of himself?
Yeah, if he doesn't throw for 300 yards, I'd be surprised. The problem for Eli, though, talk about the Eagles' pass rush. And, again, these numbers don't just measure how your defensive line is doing. It measures how your overall pass rush is doing. So if you're bringing blitzers and getting them into the quarterback, you're going to spike your numbers. Philadelphia has the 11th best pass rush metrics over the past 5 weeks. So you wouldn't think they're that good in pass rushing, but actually the advanced metrics say that they are. And the Giants are middle of the road in pass blocking. So Philadelphia needs to take that number 11 ranking and see if they can take it up a notch, add some blitzing. If I'm them, I'm very aggressive and hope that Eli is going to be bad Eli when you get pressure in his face. That's what I'm looking to do is say, Eli, you may put the ball up, but I'm going to tell these cornerbacks, fine, go for picks. We're going to try and set up situations where we're going to go after picks and get pressure on Eli because that's where you're going to beat him. Because if they just try and sit back and cover, Eli can throw for 350 against these guys.
Well, we know they can't protect much, so the Eagles do have a pretty good pass rush. It hasn't been there the last couple of games. Should they be able to get to Eli, or have the Giants tweaked enough things on the offensive side, on the offensive line, that they're better in protection? I mean, they're winning the last couple of weeks. Why is it? Because they're protecting better?
It is, and the Eagles, mind you, the Eagles, last week they didn't get a pass rush, but a lot of teams don't get a pass rush against that Saints pass blocking because the Saints are fifth best pass blocking over the past 5 weeks. They're really good. I think, and the thing is, if I'm the Eagles, I don't know that I don't want Eli trying to throw vertical passes. Again, I don't know that I didn't want them to sit back in coverage and let him throw a bunch of dink and dunk throws. I might want to get up there and get after these receivers, except Beckham, of course. You want to make sure you put 2 guys on him. I might put 3 guys on Beckham. I mean, just for, take him out of the offense because Shepard and the rest of the receivers for the Giants are nowhere near as good. But if I'm the Eagles, I am really trying to win this on defense with pass rush and say to my corners and say to my safeties, you need to make picks. If we get a couple of picks in this game, we can find a way to get 2, maybe 3 interceptions. If we get at least 2 interceptions against Eli, we win this contest because Eli will give you passes. He still doesn't do well in that bad decision rate metric, and he's even worse than you get pressure in his face. So I'm getting pressure in his face and hoping he throws picks.
KC Joyner, ESPN.com, senior NFL insider here on the Sports Bash, Eagles and Giants. All right, give us, the last time the Eagles played the Giants, they scored 34 points. It's the only time they scored 30 all year. So, do you anticipate them being able to do that again, or are these two teams in, 4 or 5 weeks' time flip-flopped?
I would hope that the Eagles, great to get 34 points, but if they try and turn this game into a shootout, that's really not a high percentage proposition for them. I know the Giants want to run the football, but I think Eagles' run defense is more capable of stopping the Giants' running game than the Eagles' secondary is of keeping up with the Giants' secondary, because the Giants' secondary does have more talent. So if I'm the Eagles, I'd like to not score 34 and try and win a 24-20 ball game. That's what I'm aiming to do. I don't want this to turn into a high-scoring contest. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm trying to lean on the ground game, trying to invite the Giants to do the same, run the football, and see how it goes from there. So I would not expect the Eagles to put up 34 points if that's the game plan that I would think they'd put together.
All right, Casey, let's take a look at the matchups here in some of these other games. We got some interesting games, some playoff implications, others not. That's what happens this time of the year. First one doesn't. Jacksonville at Buffalo. We talked about it earlier. We do a thing called the Fine Five and the Ugly Five. You can make a case that Jacksonville's one of the worst 5 teams in the league.
I did in the power rankings I sent in to ESPN earlier this week. We all have all the group power rankings. In my power rankings, Jacksonville was, I think, if they weren't the top bottom 5, they were bottom 6. They've lost 6 straight games. And Jacksonville, their blocking has been terrible of late. Their blocking is next to last over the past 5 weeks. It's not just Bortles; it's their offensive line. It stinks. And now they've lost Linder, their center, or they lost him last week, and he's banged up. So I think that I would be surprised if Buffalo didn't win this game.
Cleveland going to Cincinnati. Cincinnati's hanging around. I mean, I think Baltimore has the second wild card, so Cincinnati's right there. Their defense has been awful. Could be a big day for Nick Chubb.
I think it could be a big day for Nick Chubb. I think that Mayfield could hit some big plays. Cincinnati, they're not a team their offense has been struggling of late. They've been nowhere near as strong as they were earlier this year. They miss A.J. Green. A.J. Green might be back for this contest. I think that's the key for them. If he comes back and plays to where he's capable of playing, I think it's the factor that turns it into Cincinnati's favor. If Green doesn't play or he's slowed by the injury still, I think Cleveland wins the contest.
Jets, you can make a case. They're one of the worst 5 teams in the league. You can make a case New England's one of the best 5 teams in the league. New England's heading to New York to take on this Jets team, which, New England got a lot to play for still.
They do, but New England's defense ranks 26th. Their front 7 does. They rank 26th in my blocking metrics, or my defense metrics over the past 5 weeks, so they're having trouble. But this is the Jets. I mean, the Jets, you're running out Quincy Noon, wanting to be Robbie Anderson maybe. They've got nobody in their skill position set. Darnold's still banged up. This is the kind of game, especially bouncing back after last week, the kind of game that New England usually wins 34-10.
All right, let's look at San Francisco and Tampa. A lot of these games, not a lot of playoff implications. Tampa Bay here, though, they got to figure out what's going on with Winston.
They need to. They keep rotating back and forth in quarterbacks, and they bring in the new fact. They ought to just go ahead and put Winston out there for about a quarter and go ahead and bench him, because every time they bench one of the quarterbacks and bring the other one in, suddenly the offense does much better. So why not just go and plan for it? It's not a good sign. They have to go vertical because they can't run block, and their defense is terrible. They've got to get in the high-scoring games. San Francisco is really creative on offense. I think that Tampa Bay's firepower is going to end up winning that game for them, but San Francisco is really going to give them a run for their money. If San Francisco better quarterback play, I'd be a little more on their side.
Seattle, Carolina, some playoff implications. Carolina's got the first wild card spot. Seattle, a big win for them last week. This is a tough spot for them having to go on the road, though.
It is. In Carolina, and those run blocking metrics I mentioned, they have the second most favorable blocking matchup, or actually overall blocking matchup in the league this week. Seattle's 31st in overall defense. My front 7 metrics over the past 5 weeks, Carolina is 7th, the best in those metrics. So I think Carolina is going to be able to control the ball. Don't be surprised to see McCaffrey get his second 100-yard rushing game of the season, maybe put up 175 scrimmage yards.
We talked about Baltimore. Right now they're the second wild card in the AFC. They get Oakland coming to town. Is this a bye week for them, or are they going to be challenged at all?
Oakland is atrocious on defense. They're almost breaking my chart when I'm measuring defense, special teams, and fantasy. They are so bad. They are 30th in rush defense metrics past 5 weeks, 28th in pass rushing, easily the worst overall. And Baltimore found a back in Gus Edwards. Collins has been struggling terribly this year. Really low good blocking yards per attempt in most of his games. And Gus Edwards came in last week and did much better in that metric, and I think they found a new ground game. Plus, what they got with Jackson on the ground, and maybe Jackson will be able to hit some passes. I think I would be surprised if Baltimore didn't win this handily.
Arizona travels to L.A. to face the Chargers. Chargers with a bad loss at home last week. I know they don't have a great home field advantage, but that's a bad loss there. But they still prominently ahead in that wild card race. But this is a big one for them if they want to stay in that division race.
It is. And Arizona's been playing a lot better of late. They've been weird in that their run defense metrics have been really good this year, but they've been giving up a ton of yards on the ground because game situations never allow them to stop the other team from running the football. Their offense is so bad. But their offense is starting to get better, and they can protect their defense a little more, and the defense can actually start to show up and play better, and their defense has got a good pass rush. Having said all that, the Chargers just have so much firepower on offense. Unless they screw the thing up play-calling-wise and coaching-wise like they did last week, I think they win this game by a touchdown.
KC Joyner looking at week number 12, Pittsburgh at Denver. Not a lot of games where teams playing each other have playoff implications, but this is a tough Pittsburgh road trip. Denver gets the win on the road last week. Now they get to come home, but Pittsburgh needs this. They want, I think Pittsburgh, they got to get home field. They do not want to have to go to New England or Kansas City. Kansas City they're going to have to, but they don't want to have to go to New England. They don't want to have to travel if they don't have to. Most teams don't want to, but it seems that they get stuck in that situation. If they can get, they get that number 2 seed, I think they got a shot to go to the Super Bowl.
Pittsburgh, actually, their record in the last 18 road games, I believe they're 15-3-1 in their last 19 road games. So they are a good road warrior team. They can do that, but they don't want to go to Kansas City if they can avoid it. By the way, though, if they win this game, they're only 1 game behind Kansas City. Kansas City beat them earlier this year, so 2 games back, but 2 games back of 5 to go. Not impossible to overtake Kansas City if that's the case.
KC Joyner with us here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. All right, let's look at Miami, Indianapolis. Miami, for people who don't really know, they're kind of still hanging around this thing. What are they, 5-5? So that gives them a chance that they can get a road win here. But how about Indianapolis? I mean, you got to start considering them for a wild card and maybe a long shot in that South.
Yeah, they should be. I think the Indianapolis is one of the best teams in the league right now. I got them in the top 10 in my NFL power rankings for ESPN. I mean, that's how strong they're playing of late. They've won 4 straight, I believe it is. Their offensive line over the past 5 weeks, they are hands down the #1 team in the league in blocking. They are just dominant. They've not allowed a sack in 5 straight games. They've only allowed a quarterback to be contacted on 3% of dropbacks. It's a ridiculously low number. Miami's defense over the past 5 weeks ranks 27th in front 7 metrics. I think Indianapolis is just going to be able to road grade the Dolphins because the Dolphins are a paper tiger. They are not nearly as good as their record says that they are, and I think Indianapolis will prove that this week.
Green Bay, Minnesota, big one in the north is we know Green Bay last week, big loss for them. And then Minnesota, they're still fighting for the division. They're the second wild card right now.
Tough for Minnesota because Minnesota's offensive line is not doing anywhere near as well as they had in the past. They're 30th in my run defense metrics over the past 5 weeks, and Green Bay is not very good on run defense, but Green Bay is better than on run defense than Minnesota is on run offense. Some Minnesota's having to throw the ball as much, but Thielen's been a little banged up, so their offense hasn't been quite as good. But Green Bay, they just their blocking has been solid, but Minnesota's coverage is really good, and I think that Minnesota has more firepower than Green Bay because Green Bay is just trying to do it with these backup receivers, and it's working sometimes, it's not working other times, and they won't lean on Aaron Jones. So when you add it all together, I think they'll be outcoached and lose the game.
Monday night. By the way, Green Bay, Minnesota is Sunday night. We'll have that for you on 97.3 ESPN. And then Monday night, Tennessee, Houston. This is a huge one in the South. We talked about Indy. Houston's won 7 in a row. Tennessee beats New England. Then they lose to Indianapolis. But either way you slice it, that South is a very interesting race all of a sudden. And this one in Houston, this would be their 8th straight win. They're going to have to beat a very pesky Tennessee team to do it.
Tennessee's hard to figure out. So is Houston because Houston, even though they won 7 straight, I could barely put them in the top 10. In fact, I think I had them 11th, I had them like 8th in the power rankings. Just couldn't rank them any higher because their offense isn't anywhere near as good as you'd think it should be, given who they have. When you look at the point totals and how many points per drive they get, it's not anywhere near as strong. Their defense has been fantastic. Their defense is 4th in those front 7 metrics of the past 5 weeks. In Tennessee, I know what they did against New England, but they're still 32nd in blocking metrics over the past 5 weeks. I think Houston's front 7 dominates that game, and that's going to limit Tennessee, and it's going to give Houston the win.
All right, KC Joyner, 97.3 ESPN, as we get you ready for week number 12 in the NFL. And I know that a lot of these games don't have playoff implications in terms of one against the other, but we definitely see some playoff meaningful games. And, of course, Monday we will be back right here with Casey on the Sports Bash to break it all down. Casey, hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we always appreciate your time.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you guys, too. Appreciate it.